In Lebanon, at least 12 people were reported killed during an airstrike by Israeli forces. The United Nations Conference on Biodiversity COP16, which is being held in the city of Cali, to conclude this Friday in Colombia. And the government of Spain confirms that the death toll from the floods caused by the Dana exceeds 200 people. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from TeleSUR Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Lebanon, at least 12 people were reported killed in an airstrike by Israeli forces against the city of Amhaz in the east of the country. The authorities reported that recent bombings were aimed at destroying the residential areas of Baalbek. During the relief efforts, the fire crew reported dozens of injured and trapped victims under the rubble. Also, firefighting teams managed to extinguish a fire in a house hit by an Israeli attack in the town of Tarija. In Palestine, the Islamic Resistance Movement claims that Israel is carrying out an ethnic cleansing in Gaza before the eyes of the world. The movement denounces that the bombing of the Zionist entity against the Kamal Adwan Hospital and the ongoing massacres in Beit Lahia are war crimes and the continuation of a campaign of ethnic cleansing being carried out in the Palestinian enclave before the eyes and ears of the world. They further explain that the bombing of a hospital full of sick and wounded, as well as the bombing of densely populated neighborhoods, are another expression of Israeli fascism and extremism supported by the United States and the silence of the so-called international community. Authorities in Palestine reported at least 55 civilians killed after 3 massacres perpetrated by the Israeli army in the Gaza Strip during the last 24 hours. The Palestinian Health Ministry said that the dead, most of them women and children, were transferred to Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. The Health Ministry also said that dozens of people were injured as a result of the Israeli bombardment of several residential areas in the center of the Palestinian territory. Search and rescue operations continued throughout the day on Friday as efforts continued to locate the missing persons trapped under the rubble. At least 22 people were killed during the Israeli army's bombardment of the Gaza Strip on Wednesday. 16 people were killed and 30 wounded, including women and children, when the Israeli army shelled residential homes in the Nuseirat refugee camp. Northwest of Gaza, 4 civilians were massacred and 10 others were wounded, and in Al-Suwaida, 2 people on a bicycle were also executed by Zionist troops. The wounded were transferred to Al-Auda Hospital in the north of the Strip, while rescue teams are still searching for missing persons under the rubble, and the death toll could rise in the coming hours. The Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, maintains an intense agenda in Algeria, the African country, where she landed on Thursday with the purpose of strengthening cooperation ties. The vice mandate, who is also the Minister of Petroleum of the Bolivarian nation, held an important meeting with Mohamed Arkab, Minister of Energy and Mining of Algeria. The meeting served to reaffirm work commitments which will allow them to jointly face global economic and political challenges. They also discussed common agreements reached by President Nadir Larbou and Nicolas Maduro, who recently visited the African nation. Algeria is the 3rd largest economy of the continent and one of the countries with the highest volume of gas exports, a market in which Venezuela is entering for the first time in its history. Human rights organizations denounced that more than 62,000 people have been killed in Sudan in the midst of the civil war. The confrontation between the National Army and the paramilitary Quick Support Forces began 18 months ago. According to humanitarian organizations made up of health workers, it is one of the deadliest and most forgotten conflicts on the world scene. Recently, the United States envoy, Tom Perriello, assured Congress that the number of dead could reach 150,000 1,000. The number of displaced persons, according to the United Nations, exceeds 14 million, while the country is at the mercy of a historic famine and numerous diseases. Kenya's new Vice President Kindiki Kithure was sworn in following the ouster of his predecessor Rigathi Gachagua. The Supreme Court authorized the promotion of Kithure to the position after he passed a series of exams. His name was proposed by President William Ruto for the approval of the lower house. This was motivated by the dismissal of Gachagua for allegedly committing crimes of corruption and illicit enrichment. An attack at secondary school in the Pakistani town of Kanak in the western Pakistani province of Baluchistan left 7 people dead, including 5 children. Superintendent Nisar Ahmad Baloch stated that the attack was directed against a police vehicle which was very close to the educational center. In addition to the 5 minors, an officer and a bystander were also killed, and at least 30 people, mostly students, are being treated at the headquarters and a hospital in Mastung. The Chief Minister of Baluchistan, Safar Saras, Bukti condemned this attack and denounced that terrorists are targeting children and innocent civilians. We're going to take a short break now, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The United Nations Conference on Biodiversity, COP16, which is being held in the city of Cali to conclude this Friday in Colombia with the purpose of protecting marine areas of global ecological importance and the protection of species and ecosystems. During this closing day, topics such as the mobilization of funds and access to information on genetic resources will also be discussed. This meeting has become a scenario of dialogue and consensus, where agreements were approved that show shared responsibility among the members for the protection of vital areas for the planet. The event is also promoting the active participation of indigenous peoples, local communities and other groups in the process of ecosystem conservation, supported by funding from several countries for scientific and technical workshops. As part of the reform of the judiciary in Mexico, hundreds of judges and magistrates declined their right to stand for election next year. Antonio Aranda, our correspondent, brings us more details about this situation.
The Senate of the Republic received the resignation of 845 judges and magistrates in addition to 8 ministers of the Supreme Court of Justice who declined to participate in the election by popular vote for these positions in 2025. President Claudia Sheinbaum reiterated that this is a product of the popular mandate.
I was elected by the people of Mexico, and 8 ministers cannot be above the people, and that is what the Constitution says.
Among the judges and magistrates who will not participate in the election are those who were recently exposed in the president's morning conference for favoring powerful drug lords, corrupt politicians, or businessmen.
Juan José Fernando Garcia, judge of the 8th District in matters of federal trials in the state of Mexico, granted a flat suspension to Rafael Caro Quintero so that he would not be extradited at the request of the U.S. government. This is an irregular situation.
Some magistrates and judges acknowledged that for decades they had been out of contact with society.
This lack of communication with the people and the population was because we were identified as impartial. Nobody knows me. I solved the case. I solved the fact. That is why we did not go out to the streets. We considered it unnecessary.
Others, despite recognizing that they have advantages, decided to decline in order to receive a significant compensation.
All of us who declined are going to be compensated. although of course at the school level our experience and our track record would give us a plus for the election.
Citizens consider judges, magistrates, and ministers corrupt and support the renewal of the judiciary.
No. Para mí, nada de la justicia es honesta.
For me, none of the justice system is honest, generally speaking, because if they don't see the gifts, they don't do things the way they should be.
No hacen las cosas como deben de ser.
Ya no es algo más que uno pueda decir.
We can no longer assume that something is going to happen according to the law. We are going through a negative experience. Where my daughter was injured in the knee, and we have not been given an answer.
The 3 evaluation committees for the selection of nominations have already been set up, in which the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government are represented.
Halloween celebrations turned into true terror early Friday morning in the southern U.S. city of Orlando. 2 dead in new mass shootings so far. Eric Smith, chief of the Orlando Police, has confirmed 6 injured of varying severity, all with gunshot wounds. According to the police report, the events took place near the center of the city, where hundreds of people were celebrating the Day of the Dead. It appears that a 17-year-old man who has already been arrested opened fire on the crowd, but the officer did not explain the reasons, only reported that the suspect had a record for robbery. According to the Gun Violence Archive, this is the 440th mass shooting reported in the United States in 2024. The United Nations reported that nearly 251 million children worldwide do not have access to education despite efforts to ensure their entry into the education system. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, warns that education is in danger of becoming a privilege if certain measures are not taken, warning that disparities persist in today's society. The organization adds that the gap is alarming in rich and poor countries and calls for education to be seen as a key driver of prosperous, inclusive and peaceful societies. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TeleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The government of Spain confirms that the death toll from the floods caused by the Dana exceeds 200 people. This was announced by the Integrated Operational Coordination Center of Valencia, adding that the number of missing persons is still to be determined. Local authorities requested the presence of volunteers with vehicles and large means of transportation, as well as tools to support the work of removing debris and cleaning up the municipalities. The government maintains the event as an emergency situation too, which means that it exceeds the capacity of local agencies and it is expected to extend. In Syria, firefighters in Latakia province in the north of the country fight forest fires, leaving at least 4 injured and hundreds evacuated. Local authorities declared that teams of firefighters, civil defense, forestry department and the Syrian Arab Army are working to control the fire that spread to the localities of Al-Mashrifa and Al-Badorishiyya. So far, the flames that threatened homes in the town of Badrosija have been brought under control. Authorities say that the spread of the fire is due to the drought and gusty winds. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that the anti-aircraft defense system successfully shot down 83 Ukrainian drones in several regions of the country. The dispatch reported that throughout the night and early this morning, they prevented another attempt by the Ukrainian regime to commit terrorist acts with fixed-wing drones, which are vehicles very similar to airplanes. Against the Kursk region, Kyiv sent 36 drones. Another 20 were intended to attack civilian areas of the Bryansk Oblast. 12 of these vehicles were destroyed on their way to Crimea, and the rest were sent against Belgorod, Oryol, Voronezh without reaching their targets. In the United States, with only 4 days to go before the elections to choose the next president, the technical tie between Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump remains. Harris and Tim Walz have 41.1% of the popular vote, while Trump and J.D. Vance have 47.2% of the popular vote. However, the extreme right-wing pairing takes the lead in key states such as Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. In Pennsylvania, the key territory, Harris and Trump appear tied. The narrow margin between the candidates raises fears of an outbreak of political violence driven by the extreme right wing, which, in addition to maintaining a campaign of discredit on the reliability of the guardians of the vote, continues to doubt the victory of President Biden in 2020. In the United States, the two candidates for the November 5th elections, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, will concentrate their efforts in the final stretch of the campaign by holding rallies in 5 battleground states. This Friday, the presidential hopefuls are expected to meet again in Wisconsin, where polls show Harris leading Trump by 0.7 of a point. In this regard, Harris will also visit Atlanta in Georgia and the city of Charlotte in North Carolina, while his rival Donald Trump will visit Gastonia and Greensboro in North Carolina. The presidential elections is decided indirectly through the Electoral College, which has 538 electors, allowing a candidate to win the presidency even if he loses the popular vote. The general elections held on October 30 resulted in the defeat of the Botswana Democratic Party (BDP), which ruled for 58 years. More than 1 million registered voters were summoned to the elections, and after the first bulletins announced that the current government party lost its parliamentary majority. The president of Botswana and of the ruling party, Mokgweetsi Masisi, admitted the electoral defeat against the Coalition for Democratic Change, the main opposition party, and expressed his willingness for a smooth transition. The BDP has governed the country since independence from the United Kingdom in the 1960s, a state of barely 2.5 million people, which will be governed by a new political party for the first time in the democratic history of that African region. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.